A big hello. Welcome to the after show. It's a little bit different this week. When we can get the author, we make sure that we have an amazing Q&A for you, and that's what we've got this week. Rachel, do you like us being into a drowning deep here? Ooh.
I'm ready.
I did that. How cool.
But I'll just pretend to be a siren so they don't get me.
I've already got gifs of me doing jellyfish impersonations on the internet. I don't need to add to that. It's not, and I think it was a perfect impersonation, but like it just doesn't need to live forever.
Note to self, look up those gifts later.
It's all good. For all those watching, you can comment along. We've got you for the next hour. We've been talking about Into the Drowning Deep and breaking down the book by Mira Grant, aka Seanan McGuire. And I'm so excited to announce that we've got Seanan in the show for our Q&A right now. A big hello. How are you?
I'm quite well, although it is 1 billion degrees here in Seattle. So,
we got that heat wave going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say we don't live here to be warm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Usually it's very, very overcast there as well. How is that sun coming through?
Brightly and from above.
You're like, I just need to be hydrated. You were at Comic-Con over the weekend. How was that?
I was. You know, it actually was lovely. The safety protocols that they had put in place for attendees were very comprehensive. We have had some reports of COVID infection in attendees after the convention, but everyone that I am aware of that got sick went to the con where we had these protections in place and maybe lowered their guard a little bit and then went off site and ate dinner indoors unmasked with other people. And I am very, very big on the science of pandemics. The series I wrote prior to Into the Drowning Deep was the Newsflash trilogy, which was straight up a zombie apocalypse about the coronavirus. So I spent, when suddenly COVID hit and everyone is magically a corona expert, I literally am 5 years researching COVID and then wrote 5 books about a world where coronaviruses had basically taken over. So I'm very big on let's have good safety precautions. The show was lovely. It was sad. It was very refreshing. Like, it's very restorative. I've been going to that show since I was 16. I have gone every stage of attendee, volunteer, professional, spotlight guest. Like, I've done the whole gamut, everything but exhibitor. And because of that, I expect certain things to be in certain places. And there were vendors missing this year, people that have always been there that weren't there. Mm-hmm. And at least 2 cases, I was able to verify that it was because they had died.
Oh, God. So awful.
So that must be really quite frightening, having researched a pandemic for 5 years and then it falling out. But did you feel like you were a little bit more equipped, or is it really devastating to see what humanity is like in that situation?
I feel like I was overly optimistic. Mm-hmm. I also feel like the worst thing about COVID, and I recognize how this sounds, but the worst thing about COVID is how bad it is at being a pandemic. Mm. Because it kills such a small percentage, and that I didn't need to put the air quotes on kills, that was early, but because it kills such a small percentage while disabling such a large percentage, people want to think it's not happening. They want to pretend, well, this is just the common cold, this is just a flu. If COVID were killing a large percentage and disabling a small percentage, I think we would have taken this a lot more seriously as a community. And at this point, I honestly think we would have seen less overall death.
Whoa. Fascinating. Scary. Lose. Lose at the end of the day. It sounds like you've done, because you have written so many books over so many different genres, contemporary fantasy, horror, science fiction. You've done a lot of research. Out of all of the things that you've become an expert in, what's one of your favorite topics of discussion?
So another set of books that I wrote as Mira Grant was the Parasitology trilogy, which was about genetically engineered tapeworms. And in order to research that book accurately, because the foundational concept behind it is a thing called the hygiene hypothesis, which holds that we're seeing a rise in allergies and autoimmune conditions because we've had such a large reduction in the parasitic load of the population. The hygiene hypothesis is still being tested. There are medical trials going on that are treating Crohn's disease and other autoimmune conditions with controlled hookworms. And so I went to a doctor who had some questionable ethics and was thus willing to go along with me, and got myself a tapeworm. And that was Timmy. And I had him for 3 years so that I could accurately chronicle what it was like to have a tapeworm. And that was, I would not call myself a parapsychology expert, but that was probably the most fun research I've ever done. I could use the royal we for 3 years. And then that actually did become relevant during COVID because one of the miracle drugs that they were saying would somehow magically cure a virus is an antiparasitic that I was actually on when the time came to clear out Timmy. And that is not a fun drug, y'all. That an awful, awful, unpleasant, painful drug. And I don't understand why anybody would sign up for that, voluntarily. I am watching the chat stream. Catch22 says that's a bit extreme. My editor thought so too. I'm pretty sure I made him lose a couple lunches. So,
wow. I'm with Vaden here. That is true dedication.
Yeah.
You went full method for your books. That is amazing. I have been, as I mentioned before the show, this is my second time reading Into the Drowning Deep, and I really want to dig into some of your other books. What would you say is a good next step after Into the Drowning Deep for a series to start of yours?
I mean, I always recommend Feed. It is one of my favorite of my works. It's something that I feel is among the best things I've ever written. That said, it was released in 2010, so it is now 12 years old, and I wrote it when I had much less of a personal understanding of ableist language. So I didn't know a lot of these words were bad words, were inappropriate words for me to use. And so they are rife in that book. If I could go back and do a rewrite now just to be my own sensitivity reader from this perspective, I would do so. But I do recommend the Newsflesh books. You've got Feed, Deadline, and Blackout, which are the main trilogy. And then there are 2 supplemental books if you enjoyed them. Feedback, which is the exact same book as Feed. It starts the same day and it ends the same day. It's just about a different group of people moving through. So it was that moment in Cloverfield where the guy with the camera turns around and there's another guy with a camera looking at him. I wrote that book because I have no chill. You may have figured that out. There is Rise, which is the collection of all of the short fiction in the Newsflesh universe, including How Green This Land, How Blue This Sky, which is the zombie apocalypse eats Australia. Zombie wombats are the best time I've had in a while.
Oh my gosh. You
Zombats?
They're big enough. And it's like punching a concrete piling covered in fur that now wants to eat your face.
So Miss Necromancer has read a lot of your books and is a big fan of the Newsflesh series, and it works at a bookshop and so keeps pushing that one out. Did you say that it's set in Australia?
No, there's one piece of short fiction set in Australia. The main trilogy is actually set in America. So a thing you may have noticed from Drowning Deep and from just talking to me for 20 seconds, I love research. I really like having an excuse to take a weird scientific fact and dig into it until everyone around me hates me. I talk about it constantly. It's what I'm learning right now. It's what I'm obsessed with. It's my new special interest. And I wanted to write a zombie series where the virology was good and where the social response made sense and where we won, where the humans learned how to live with this ongoing zombie situation rather than it being post-apocalyptic. And so I started working on how can I do this? What pieces would I need to put where to make this a functioning setting? And the people that I had dinner with on a weekly basis got to listen to this in real time Thursday night for 3 years.
Wow.
Only Michael, who controlled the cooking, said, if you don't figure out how to write this book, you're not coming to dinner next week. And I said, but I have a setting and no plot. And he said, I don't care what you do. Write a presidential election. Just do it. So I went home and I wrote the first 10,000 words. And it is the first book is a team of bloggers, a team of internet personalities following a presidential election after the zombie apocalypse. And then it all kind of goes to hell from there.
Wow. That's A, incredible, and B, as someone who likes to research for my hyperfixations, I spent a very long time reading about sirens and all of that after this, and I'm very excited to dive into that. And you also said, you've, as I think a lot of us have learned, what language is ableist, what
Mhm.
all of these different perspectives. And one of the things that we talked about on the show today was just how, or like, normal the inclusivity in the book is. And for me, as I was rereading it, I read it a few years ago, and Olivia's character really spoke to me in certain things that she was saying. And my boyfriend was reading the book as well, and he was saying like, "Oh, what's going on here?" And I was like, "I think she's neurodivergent in some way." And just having all of these perspectives. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about that, and why that's important to you?
So, as an autistic writer, neurodivergence research is super easy for me. I just yell at myself for a while. Uh, I picked up a policy a while ago of trying to make sure people can see themselves in books.
Mm.
Somebody says to me, I don't get to see characters that look like me in books. I don't get to be in books. I immediately will try to add a character that looks like them to the next book that I'm working on. And Drowning Deep got hit with a lot of that. We did have, well, hit with, it was a good thing. It made me really happy. I had a great time. But, Tori, Victoria, who is one of our main characters, Tori was going to have to be a white girl. And I knew that because she is the little sister of a character who died in the prequel novella, which had already been written. But other than that, we had essentially completely, race blind casting for the characters in the book. They just kind of came up as they came up. And I tried to make sure people were put in to have a wide range of diversity. And part of that is the load-bearing lesbian principle. I will always say the problem is not killing gay characters. You should be allowed as an author or a creator to kill any character you need to move the story forward. The problem is killing all the gay characters. If you have one lesbian, that is your load-bearing lesbian. You cannot take it out or the entire thing collapses. If you have 17 of them, well, you can feed one through a meat grinder. It's all okay. Okay. A lot of people die in that book because it is very much a not quite a TPK, but it tries for it real hard. And that was actually ironically why I had to have a couple of white guys, because they were the only characters I could be sure no one would yell at me for offing. And that is sometimes a principle. Vedana, I may have pronounced that wrong, I'm sorry, says, when it comes to the deaf characters in the book, did they inspire the mimicry of the sirens or vice versa? So the deaf characters in the book were included in part because I speak a very little ASL. I'm not great at it. I've made it through ASL 2 twice, and then I don't have anyone to talk to, and so I forget everything. But I think it is very important, regardless of where you live, to learn at least a few basic signs of whatever your area's dominant sign language is. I learned to fingerspell, I learned to say help, I learned to ask if you need the bathroom. And those are important signs to have because I have actively, materially improved other people's days. Disneyland, and we had someone by the counter just frantically trying to sign to the cast member who couldn't figure out what was going on. I was able to go over there and ask if they wanted help, what do you need, and follow them enough to get them where they needed to be. Such a small thing to do, but it means I spend a lot of time around members of the deaf community in my classes. And well, not a lot right now because we're in a global pandemic, but outside of that, just trying to understand the cultural nuances. It's why we have the bit at the beginning of the book about there is a difference between ASL and signed exact English, which is a very important thing to point out because they are different languages, and you would not have 2 ASL native speakers and 1 ASL translator who were doing SEE. There's no reason for that. But if you actually transcribe ASL grammar, you get that moment from Modern Family where the woman is saying, "You have no idea how smart I am in Spanish." Because English reader, that is not going to sound like a well-constructed sentence, even though it absolutely is in the language its grammar is native to.
Have you gotten a lot of feedback? Because you are, in a way, it's edutainment. So you're writing a really great book whilst also using education in a way to kind of teach people. Have you had good feedback or impacted people's lives that you've heard about?
I have. Not as much with this book, although, wow, did the autistic lesbian community decide I was their patron saint for like 6 months. It was great. Love my autistic lesbians. Lesbian, totally down for that. But people get really excited when they see someone like them in text for the first time. What was fun was one of the comments that did stick out, that did stick with me, was someone saying that the deaf characters were very realistically handled. But the interpreter was ridiculous, and they assumed I was a man because she was talking about how she was attractive, and that was a problem. The interpreter is a real person. She is a friend of mine who won a Tuckerization in an auction and asked to be included in the book. She is a professional ASL interpreter. She is 6'2". The first time we met, she was in full cosplay as Emma Frost. This woman could be a WWE next wrestler. She is drop dead gorgeous. Are we allowed to swear? Built like a brick shithouse. Like this She-Hulk lives. And so, the interpreter saying, I am very attractive and people look at me and that can be a problem, is completely realistic to life. That is an experience that interpreters have. And I've had several interpreters thank me for that. But a lot of people do read my books to try and see some representation. And I just keep trying to give it to them. I also keep trying to diversify more and more because I want to kill people. I'm not a horror writer because I want everyone to live. That's not why I'm here. If I was that, I'd be writing children's books. And when I wrote Into the Drowning Deep, Olivia was, near as we could tell, 100% of the autistic lesbian representation in mainstream science fiction.
Wow.
She's functionally the load-bearing lesbian for an entire genre. You cannot kill her. She is immune to harm.
If you did kill her, though, Seanan, because she's also, representing the geek host that covers Comic-Con, I would have come for you.
That's fair. But at this point, because we have had several years since that book, thankfully, we do have more representation. Not enough, but we have enough representation that I can threaten to kill Olivia, and it might feel realistic for half a page before someone's like, no, Seanan doesn't kill the load-bearing lesbian. It's fine.
You get killers, though, where if you take one out, the structure still holds, though. You don't know which one's going to go.
I try not to kill anyone that is an actively measurable percentage of the representation that group has in genre, because there's so few of us. I had someone get mad at me and say, oh, are you saying we can't write white men anymore? I'm like, no, write whatever you want. Write your story. But if every single person who read this book pledged to not write another main character that was a straight white man for 50 years, it still would not measurably dilute the percentage of genre protagonists that are straight white men. Now, everyone deserves new characters that fit their story, that fit their narrative. But we have so much room. We have so much space right now, and we're using so much of it on one little slice of the demographic, and that's just not cool.
I find that people were initially scared to write outside of what they knew because it wasn't as authentic as it could be. Knowing your side of things and what you're bringing to the table, being neurodivergent and also I believe it's pansexual, bisexual, or an array of kind of like what's now a little bit more spoken about, but I guess way back then it wasn't really touched upon. How much of what you embody is written within your characters across the books? I guess what I'm trying to say is, which character is most like you out of everything that you've written? But I just spent a while asking.
Because I don't ramble at all. Out of absolutely everything that I've written, probably the character that is most like me is the Lushok from over in Toby Day. She is an infinitely powerful sea witch. I don't have that going for me, sadly. I lack the infinite cosmic power, but she is just tired. I went through the whole period in my 20s of trying to figure out my labels. And for the most part, I default to lesbian because it's the easiest. I'm in a long-term relationship with another woman. We're all good there. But I really think that my gender and sexual identity is tired. I want a nap. I identify as a person who is going to bed as soon as we hang up this call. that is not mocking at all. That is completely sincere, as anyone who knows me will tell you.
I just had a nap.
Yeah, see, there you go. I do think that one of the important things about giving more representation is that we learn how to identify with other people and how to write the stories about other people from the things that we take in, from the stories we experience. And that is why I have been writing about straight white men since I was a baby. Just about. If you look at my earliest work, like the very first things I wrote and the very first things I published, all of the queerness is extremely background. It's very, very front and center heterosexual romance, if there's no at all. And that's because those are the stories I knew how to tell. I actually had to learn how to unpack some of the bad narratives I had learned. And that's not saying that straight love stories are bad, just that queer love stories are good too. And I should be allowed to have those. I do think that there is something to be said for staying in one's own lane to a certain degree. There is a reason that writing the other seminars and classes are good and important things, and that we need sensitivity readers when possible. But that doesn't mean we can only write the people who look like and are like us. The more stories we absorb with the more different points of view, the better equipped we'll be to write more stories about those kinds of people, whether they're us or not. We need to read stories about ourselves too. That's important, because otherwise we literally lose the ability to empathize with our own kind.
Fascinating. I love that. And I love that, like, once because you write a lot, you write so much. And I think it's like not even one genre can contain you. But I think getting that familiarity of diversifying, using inclusion. I read a tweet of yours that said you write the world as it really is. Why do you think other authors do still struggle with it?
With the writing of diversity, or with the just
the way you write, like, I mean, it's the comments have been going, thank you so much for normalizing things that are normal. And I think it's you've said that you write the world as it really is, which is a lot of inclusivity, which is a lot of, we were talking about it earlier in the book club, where you included things that weren't necessary to the story, but were great to kind of address. And that's chronic pain. It's autism. It's all of these things that are super normal. But I think that, it's easy for you to do it. And I think it's a little bit harder for others to do it.
I don't know that it's easy or hard for anyone. It's mostly just practice and making an effort. Miss Necromancer has said for a long time, fan fiction was the bastion of queer stories. I came up through fan fiction. I literally signed with my agent because she enjoyed my Buffy the Vampire Slayer porn.
I was going to ask what it was. It was Buffy?
So many different things, but that was the one that she had experienced. And it's funny that it was the porn, because I don't write sex. It's not fun. It's IKEA. You know what's going to happen. There is no write the sex. I'm interested in what happens up to the sex, and I'm interested in what happens after the sex. That's the fun parts. I think the hard part for a lot of us is just acknowledging that we need to make an effort, that you can't just default to writing yourself again and again and again. That you can't default to what feels easy and what doesn't require you to actually ask yourself any questions, or understand that some things are not for you. And the danger of writing anything that's not yourself is a thing you'll have to accept, because you will make missteps, you will make mistakes, and also cultural norms will shift. I've tried to include a lot of trans characters in my work. There aren't any, I believe, in Into the Drowning Deep, but there are in a lot of my other series and books. And the first of them was the princess over in Velveteen. And she is wonderful. She is a superheroine whose power is straight up, I have all the powers that children attribute to Disney princesses. So she is basically unstoppable. She is a nightmare rolling wasteland of destruction. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the attitudes toward what we now call dead names were very different when I was learning how to speak to and about and with the trans community. It was very standard at that time in that place that if I were a trans person, I might come up to you and say, "Hi, I'm Seanan. You may remember me as Steve." That wasn't viewed as a social faux pas or as any way inappropriate. That was putting myself into context for you. Princess does that at one point. And I know now, because of where the community has gone, that that is not a cool thing. And again, if I could rewrite it now, I would. So when you're writing outside your own community, that change, that shift, you're not going to see it coming as well. You're not going to be able to necessarily guess on it as well. And that can be frightening. That can be really, really scary for people.
Have you experienced any sort of backlash for that, or is there a lot of empathy with, it respecting the time that it was in?
Not for that in specific, in part because Velveteen is currently out of print. But you do run into issues periodically. I had someone recently put up some content warnings for one of my books that was published in like 2017. It was a while ago. And they said, content warning, Elliot Page misgendering and dead naming, content warning, Harry Potter reference. And I'm like, at the time, the description of Elliot was accurate, and he didn't even know his name was Elliot then. And referencing Harry Potter, everyone writing in a modern setting was doing that in 2017. We know that JKR was going to get on the bigot bus and ride it all the way to Turktown.
Yeah.
Preach. 100%. We covered the books on book club, and
I'm totally down for giving that content warning so that people aren't surprised. But the way that the specific review was written was just like, this author assaulted me with these words out of nowhere. And I'm like, copyright dates are a thing, y'all.
Yeah. I actually, something that really helped me with that, especially in the comedy circuit where, jokes back then changing. It was an Australian comedian, Jim Jeffries, who said that at that moment in time, there is a line that you can walk up to. There's the boundary, and you can cross that line. But what comedians will do is walk up to that line, and that line changes. And as, the years go on, the line moves. But it's like, don't get mad at me because I told an appropriate joke at that time, which has now been deemed inappropriate. So it's like honoring the time of which it was. And we are evolving so fast, and we're learning. And as soon as you think you've learned something and you're in a good place with it, be prepared to evolve further. The one that I struggle with the most is how we create social and digital media content. The rules change every 18 months. And
every 2 days, it seems like.
Yeah.
Yes. When you think about 2010, even 2017, but certain movies like Tropic Thunder came out in 2009. That movie would not get made now. That movie would absolutely not get made now. And so having the content, it's similar when you see film criticism of a movie from the 70s, and you're like, my friends, it's just. You have to kind of follow the cultural time and context, and I think to speak to your writing and your books and Into the Drowning Deep, the fact that you have listened, have learned, and continue to do that, I think is what everyone who wants to be inclusive or who wants to be included. That's what we want. It's no one's ever going to be perfect at every single. So,
and I appreciate that we are starting to understand that no one's ever going to be perfect. But for a while there, it was like all time was right now. We were Wolf Riders. We were living in ElfQuest, the now of Wolfbot. If you did a bad thing 20 years ago, you did a bad thing just now. And that is a lot to carry. Like I have done some bad things. I've been around a little while. But I try really, really hard to not repeat bad things. And if you tell me that a thing I did is a bad thing, I try to course correct. There are words that were a big part of my vocabulary for a long, long time that I will still sometimes slip and start to use. And I am pretty good at this point about catching myself after a syllable and going, I am so sorry. I am trying to eliminate that word from my vocabulary.
I think, that's the difference between sort of harassment. I say it's like when you learn where the boundary is and you're like, hey, and it becomes harassment when you've learnt and you continue to still do it. And then assault is when you weaponize it, I find.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love these sorts of discussions though. Thank you so much for having them with us. We are talking about Into the Drowning Deep. Now, I read in a tweet that you do want to continue that story.
Oh yeah, there's a whole sequel outlined. It's called Out of the Swallowing Sea, and I usually tell people for the elevator pitch that it's like, what if we did Jurassic Park but with mermaids? Because of course we've made it to the facility in Hawaii by that point, and siren biology is a lot closer to clownfish than I think a lot of people have realized. So we're gonna have a fun nightmare party if we can convince Orbit to take it.
How so with the biology?
So, clownfish, one of my favorite facts about clownfish, and they're not unique in this, they're just one of the more prevalent ones. If you take all the clownfish away, and so you have one clownfish, that clownfish will almost always change genders. They will completely metamorphically shift from being a female clownfish to a male clownfish, or vice versa. Now, in species where there is extreme sexual dimorphism between the male and female members of the species, this change only goes one way.
No.
A little bit of horrified realization there, but yeah.
Of the sirens, yeah.
So they're going to get themselves a girl in that tank if they don't let him out soon.
What are you doing? Looking up the dino's skirts?
Yeah, pretty much. Like that is very much a Jurassic Park thing, but that is a thing taken from real biology. And Michael Crichton was a plagiarist anyway, so I don't feel bad about stealing his science.
Did you actually read that amazing tweet that I went through? I scoured Twitter. I wrote a comment about it. The tweet said that the book gave off Michael Crichton vibes, but better researched and less misogynistic. I thought that was a really lovely.
Yeah, that is a comment that has come up a lot. Ta-da! It's okay. 22 says, I like Crichton. I like Crichton too. I've enjoyed a lot
of Jurassic Park.
That being said, perhaps there's a book you've heard about. This scientist finds a way of extracting dinosaur DNA from mosquitoes preserved in amber and decides to use it to clone dinosaurs and create a theme park. He actually opens this in London. He has a T-Rex. He has Deinonychus. And Deinonychus, for those who aren't familiar with the name, that is a raptor-type dinosaur approximately the size of a human adult. Velociraptor was the size of a turkey. They were itty-bitty things. And a variety of other dinosaurs. Now, just before the park is supposed to open up to the public for the first time, a lawyer and the grandchildren of one of the primary financiers come to visit. And of course, the dinosaurs get out, and then everyone gets eaten. The book I have just described is called Carnosaurus. It is by a man named Harry David Knight. It was published many years before Jurassic Park.
Damn. That wasn't even just sprinkling in some of the borrowed details. That was
he lifted the whole plot. Now, technically, that's not plagiarism because you can't copyright an idea. You can only copyright the execution thereof. And Jurassic Park is much heavier on the actual science, whereas Carnosaurus was much more, let's see dinosaurs eating people. Woo! It's a big fun time. But it was still an incredibly shady thing to do, especially since Crichton was already a fairly popular author by that point, with a reputation for lifting plots from other books, from other people. And Harry David Knight was not. He was a relatively minor horror author. I just kind of feel like you shouldn't punch down if you don't read fanfic of my own work, even though I love fanfic. Because if your fanfic is well enough written, I might not remember whether the idea was from your fanfic or my story. I might legitimately not be aware of who came up with it because you did it well. Good job, you. Only now I'm stealing your ideas. And even though legally I think I'm the right there because it was a derivative work of my material, it makes me a shitty neighbor. Try not to be a bad neighbor. That's my main goal.
I didn't know that about Jurassic Park. It's just, this is the business, isn't it? But it had a better name.
It had a better name. It had better, like, legitimately, I have read both books many, many times. And legitimately, Jurassic Park is a better book. I'm not going to pretend it's not. But it has some shady beginnings, and I don't like that. I don't like the fact that almost no one has heard of Mr. Knight, even though he wrote some of my favorite works. Carnosaur not being among them super much. And I don't know. I don't like that I get compared to Crichton a lot while trying desperately to be a better person. That's really my only goal here. Game Wizard 001 says, was glad you mentioned Jurassic Park. Michael Crichton was clearly an influence. What other influences did you use when writing this story? Fun fact. I was the first ever dual major at the University of California, Berkeley, go Bears, in folklore and herpetology, which is basically the snakes and fairy tales degree. No one else has ever done this degree combo because stupid degree combo. What that. You are literally equipped for nothing in life if that is what you do. I am equipped to be in academia, to be teaching people, and I don't have the temperament for teaching people, to write science fiction novels. And that is what I settled on as being slightly saner. It does have a lot of fun benefits. The last time I went to Australia, I went to the Healesville Animal Sanctuary in Melbourne, which has an associated reptile park and research station, with a note from my old herpetology professor. Pretty much walked in and said, "I'm an American herpetologist. Can I milk your taipan?" And they handed me the third deadliest snake in the world. Just, here you go.
I milked it.
And so I got to milk a taipan in Australia, which was delightful.
That's a sentence.
They're beautiful, very sweet snakes. They will kill the crap out of you. Like, one of those bites you, you're just dead. There's no point. And this was the Ron Jeremy of taipans. Like, they handed him to me and he knew what was about to go on. He saw that cup. He popped Fang immediately. It was just, ooh, baby, ooh, baby, ooh, baby. Okay, I'm done. Where's my mouse? Like, he was on the ball. And that is something you could not have done without having studied herpetology. So a lot of my influences really are folklore and herpetology texts because I like to read the science. It makes me happy. Crichton is a big influence. Stephen King is a big influence. He's been my favorite author since I was 9.
You were reading King at 9?
I was. There were some bad parenting decisions made where I was concerned.
Yeah, but look what it did, though. It put you on the path of pumping out books.
Like a very confused machine. It was a big one for me, too.
What was that last one? I'm so sorry.
Bradbury.
Oh, we love Bradbury around here.
Bradbury's my favorite science fiction, actually my favorite author, like Martian Chronicles.
Mm-hmm. He's the reason that I found out author was an option. I thought that books were so important that they had to somehow just happen. I didn't really know how that mechanic was supposed to work, but I was sure of it. They just occurred. They were like lunchbox trees in Oz. Somewhere in a library, there's a book tree and people pick books off of it, and it's great. But I was a kid in the 80s. You know, there's no point in pretending I'm not my age because, one, I don't care, and two, my Wikipedia page will tell you like that. So I was a kid in the 80s, which was the golden age of horror television. We had Freddy's Nightmares, Friday the 13th, the series, Nightmares, Tales from the Dark Side, and that would just be my entire Saturday night. I did not understand why anyone would ever date. If you date, you would miss Tales from the Dark Side. And so there was this show that came on fairly early in the horror block that took up my social time called Ray Bradbury Presents. And at the beginning of every episode, there would be the credit sequence, which ended with this older man. And I was like 7. He was ancient. He was Methuselah, like this ancient dude at a typewriter pounding away. And then he would pull a sheet of paper out of the typewriter and throw it into the air, and it would float down and form the logo. And I got mad at him one day. Asked my grandmother, who is that guy? Why is he here? That is another 60 seconds of story that I am not getting. Genuinely incensed that this man was allowed to take up the time that was supposed to be story. And my grandma looked at me and said, well, that's Ray Bradbury. He wrote this story. And I pretty much just went, what? Like, that's an option. And I decided I was going to be an author the next day. Lots of people now commenting on teen TV shows about horror. Are You Afraid of the Dark? Goosebumps, Tales from the Crypt. These are all wonderful shows. I love them so much. Are You Afraid of the Dark is actually back. They've done a series on Netflix, I think, and they're doing a second one. So that's very exciting.
All I remember, I didn't like the horror when I was a kid. I'm very adverse to horror. I loved this book, though. I didn't think it was like horror. I was like, yeah, this is great. If you had a ghost in there, I'd probably run, but this was great. I just noticed that it was like, Are You Afraid of the Dark? I think isn't that where like Ryan Gosling and a lot of these big actors got their first breaks? They were all just the most good-looking, teens I'd ever seen. And as a 13-year-old, I'm like, I'll be scared.
Presented for the approval of the Midnight Society, I call this the story of the A-list actors.
Go start somewhere. Speaking
of,
oh no, Rachel's got one.
Sorry, I was just thinking of those of Bradbury and that type of horror. Did you read Christopher Pike at all?
I did.
Yeah, I have you. Do you like those? Because I feel like we're starting to see a like Fear Street, Christopher Pike resurgence too. And I grew up reading those in the library when I was much too young.
So the Fear Street movies are beautiful and I love them. They're fantastic. I know it's a different site, but there's a reread of all of Christopher Pike going on over on Tor.com.
Oh, I love Tor. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been super fun to watch because there is some really problematic shit in some of those early Christopher Pikes. And I don't just mean like the horror tropes of abusive parents or incest, which is problematic, but you kind of expect in genre. I mean, just like, let's
Lizard people.
entire book on the concept that mental illness makes you evil.
Mhm.
That'll be fun. So I did read Christopher Pike. I am not rereading it now because I feel like the suck fairy would have come for it between my first read and this read.
Yeah.
You can stave the suck fairy off for a while if you keep rereading constantly.
Yep.
The first time I read Stephen King's It, I was younger than the kids in the Loser Society, and I'm now older than the adults in the Loser Society. It's been a fascinating journey to be on. I reread the book once a year. And I find something new every time. My understanding and relationship with the book changes and shifts. And I didn't see anything wrong with what happened in the sewer until I was like 17. Because the first time I read it, they were big kids doing a big kid thing. And then that was just what happens in the book. And so I kept going and I didn't see a problem until I was basically an adult myself. And then I'm like, wait, what? No. So our relationships with these things are incredibly contextual and time sensitive. And that's kind of where I am with Pike. It was not actually your question.
No, but because I haven't, I have a bunch of the old ones and I haven't reread them because I am afraid of that, but I have fond memories. But I love that Fear Street and that they're making more of those as well.
Mhm.
Because when they announced it, I was like, I bet they're going to do the trilogy of the origin story. And so now they have all of these other stories that they can tell within that universe that can be standalone. So anyway, just
Yeah.
your thoughts.
No, I'm super excited because they did a great job with that origin story trilogy of rectifying and resolving some of the problematic stuff. There were still a few things I had issues with.
Mhm.
But on the whole, they did a really glorious job. And so I'm hoping that the movies will continue to uplift and kind of redeem a little bit the source material in that they can get more timeless.
Yes. Love that.
It's all about evolution, evolving
Everything.
as authors, as writing. Have you got a book coming out next month? Oh, September?
I have. As Seanan, I've got Be the Serpent, which is book 16 in the October Day series because we again have no chill. And that's some of the things I've talked about here continually relevant to me because the very first book I ever published was the very first October Day book. So it was in 2009. And so there are gendered slurs and ableist words all the way through the book. And I didn't know. I know that sounds fake when you're looking at it from this position in this modern day, because how could anyone not know? But I didn't know.
Yep.
And so if I tell you to read the Toby Day books, to pick up Rosemary and Rue and start, I am telling you that I'm going to throw a bunch of rocks at you. But the rocks were innocently thrown when I flung them. I need people to kind of remember that. And you can see when this conversation started and I started to really understand around book 5, which was when One Salt Sea. But so it's book 16. I'm super excited. I know I'm just like apologizing for my series. I don't sound excited, but I'm so excited. So very few urban fantasy series make it to book 16. Series have legs to want to make it to book 16. People get bored, readers drop off, authors go off to do other things, authors get hit by trucks, whatever. But I made it to 16 and I'm so happy, and I'm not done yet. And I really just need to live long enough to finish this series. That makes me really glad.
How many books ahead have you kind of got the story mapped out?
I am not allowed to acknowledge that number.
Got it? Good.
Got it?
Apparently it is intimidating. So
Oh, really? No, I
Hey.
think that's fantastic. Honestly, the amount of times where it's like someone has a contained idea and it's like, this is really great. What else have you got? And it's like, more? The fact that you can build a world and have that much to tell in it, fantastic.
I mean, the one thing I can absolutely say I have going for me as an author is if you like one of my books, I guarantee there's another one. There is so many more. But yeah, no, Toby comes out in September. And then there are actually 3 of me. The third of me is a middle grade author, A. Deborah Baker, and she's doing the Up and Under series, and she has a book out in October. And, you know, that'll be fun. That's only a 4-book series, and I'm finishing off book 4 right now. So that's actually kind of self-contained a little bit, except for the part where those books exist, because they are the fictional books that I introduced in Middle Game, where if you read the book, and I love Middle Game, it is still the best thing I've ever written. If you read Middle Game, the start of each section opens with an excerpt from a book called Over the Woodward Wall, which is kind of an Oz cognate, and it's a big deal in that universe that here's Over the Woodward Wall in the Up and Under books, and they were very Ozian. And you get maybe 20 pages of that book over the course of Middle Game. And Middle Game, we sold to Tor.com Publishing, and I was so happy about that because I love that book so much. I know that sounds really twee, but I wrote that book for my brother, and it's kind of like, I love you and I want to write a book that will make you happy. So I wrote Middle Game, and it's a book about sibling relationships and horrifying abominations of alchemy, and it makes me really glad. And so I had written about 20 pages total of this book that you saw. So my editor comes to me about 2 months after Middle Game has come out and is doing really well. And so we're very pleased. And he's like, hey, do you think if we asked, you might consider writing Over the Woodward Wall? And I went, would you like a copy?
I already had it.
Of course, I had written it to write Middle Game. You can't excerpt a book that doesn't exist.
Wow. Wow.
If you read Parasite, the Parasitology trilogy also depends very heavily on a children's book called Don't Go Out Alone. And I wrote Don't Go Out Alone. It's never been published, but I have the manuscript, and that's important to me that I have my supplemental materials.
I love it. I love
Thorough.
it. What can we do to encourage the swallowing sea to be made? Can we do
I mean, the lowest effort thing that you can do, and the thing that costs no money but just a little time, is to write to Orbit and say, I have enjoyed Into the Drowning Deep. I have heard that Seanan would like to write a sequel. I would very much like to read this sequel. Can you please acquire the sequel to The Drowning Deep? And you can do that via email. You can do that in physical letter. Please don't use my exact words. That will look like I've set up a form somewhere for people to bad. B-Rock Vandal asks, is Orbit on Twitter? Orbit is on Twitter, but the person who manages their Twitter feed does not have the authority to acquire books. So by writing to them, that is something that they can't pretend it didn't happen, but they are unlikely to because they want to make money. Now, speaking of money, that gets to the slightly more complicated answer, which is that Into the Drowning Deep was joint accounted with a book with feedback, which is the 5th of the Newsflesh books. And what joint accounting means is that I am loaning $20 to Rachel and $20 to Maude. Sorry. But until both of them have paid me back, they are both considered to owe me $20. So I give them $20 today. Rachel comes over tomorrow and hands me $20 and then goes, hey, can I borrow another 10? And I say, no, you still owe me $20. Until I get Maude's money back, you can't borrow anymore. And because feedback was book 5 in a series with a lesbian main character at a time when that was not yet trendy, and I'm not saying trendy in a bad way. I'm saying that now publicity knows how to market that. They know where the audience is. We didn't really have that audience. And to get to the lesbian, you kind of had to read through 3 books of zombie apocalypse, which is not everybody's cup of tea. And so there were so many reasons. But because those books are joint accounted and feedback has not done as well as Into the Drowning Deep, the accountants at Orbit still think that Out of the Swallowing Sea is a bad monetary bet.
So we got to get on Newsflashes as well?
Yep.
Well, so the free version, the thing that gets it to you for free, is just writing. Write for free. The version that costs money and takes more time is buy and engage with Newsflash, because that encourages them to think of Mira Grant, the brand, as something that they want to support.
And we've already got people in the community absolutely championing that series that's read it. So that's an easy one as well. And we run book clubs, so that's also quite convenient.
Yeah, Mira Grant was a pseudonym to distinguish my science fiction from my urban fantasy, and there were very, very good reasons for that. And I desperately wanted it to be a female pseudonym because I kill a lot of women, as it turns out. And if you don't know that I am one, it looks like I'm being super misogynistic because I write a lot of women. There are 20 women and 10 of them die because we're so used to it being, let's just kill all the girls. We don't notice that 10 men also died. So I wanted it to be a female pseudonym. And we workshopped for weeks to find something that I could live with, that I could sign. I wanted to be Samantha Grant, but unfortunately the website was not available. And at the time, you really couldn't get published if you couldn't get the .com.
Wow.
So we Mira, which is a complicated 6-layer deep horror movie in-joke, but also turns out to be the name of the Mental Illness Research Association grant. So my fighters don't just tell me when Mira Grant books get reviewed, they tell me when the Mental Illness Research Association gives out money.
That's great.
Wow.
It's kind of fabulous. Kind of silly, but kind of fabulous.
It fits in. Have you got another, I bet you do, but have you got like another series in the back pocket that was an idea where you've already built out the universe ready to go?
Oh, always.
Yeah.
As Mira, I was trying because of Drowning Deep. I love Drowning Deep. I love it so much. I love the characters that survived. I love the setting. I spent literally years talking to marine biologists, and it is harder to get a marine biologist to talk about mermaids than it is to get the CDC to talk about the zombie apocalypse. Learn, but I desperately want to do this school. In my perfect world of sunshine and zombie puppies, I get to do several. Because there are going to be things in that world other than just mermaids. But because of what happened with Drowning Deep, me too. Because of what happened with Drowning Deep, with the publisher saying we're not sure we want to continue, we're not sure the money is there. I've been trying to focus on standalones for Mira. For the last several years, she, and I refer to her in the third person because otherwise it gets really confusing. She has mostly been doing novella length works with Subterranean Press. And those are limited edition hardcovers that are available in ebook, but only in the United States. So there are so many suboptimal things about this. So many. And standalone novels. I have one finished full-length Mira Grant standalone that we're going to take out on submission soon. And then I have the one that I was writing when COVID began, which was set up as a standalone because it's a TPK of all mammalian life on Earth. And it's a TPK.
You can't put that out.
Yeah, and it's a TPK with an airborne pathogen at its core.
You can't do that.
I know. And when I am writing the world collapsing, as we're just starting to get the first bits of news on COVID and how it's working, and I'm watching how real people actually respond to a life-threatening pandemic, I had to table it. Like that one is actually sold. And I really want people to read it. I'm so happy with what I've done so far. I'm happy with the representation. I'm happy with the setting. I'm happy with the things apart from the pathogen. But if I take out the pathogen, there is no book. It's just a bunch of nerds opening a zoo. So I kind of need the horrifying flesh-eating disease. Yeah, my mental health will not actually survive me trying to write this book. So
I think that's super fair.
So does my editor, thankfully, because we've had to tell him like 3 times I can't finish that book right now, and his response has been, "Yeah, legit."
Yeah.
Is Into the Drowning Deep going to be maybe a TV show or a movie? Because it was so easy to visualize this.
It was actually optioned for film, and we had gotten very far along in the development and production process. We were almost ready to start shooting, and then COVID.
Oh my goodness.
My life.
Oh dear.
So
you need like an Imagine Entertainment with lots of money just ready to buy.
I would love it. If honestly, I'd love it if just Sci-Fi came and said, we want to resurrect the Sci-Fi Saturday night specials. I would be down for that. It would be a terrible movie. It would be so bad. And I would not care because 1, it would be a movie. 2, I love terrible creature features. And 3, even the worst piece of visual media, even the absolute worst, has a greater reach than basically any book not written by Stephen King or Shall Not Be Named or any of those people. And having a Sci-Fi Channel movie that said based on the book by, the sales would go through the roof, and or immediately commission the sequel.
Mm-hmm.
I want to write the sequel more than I want a good movie.
Okay, yeah. I'll have
great.
to audition. I want to audition for. Oh, she's not Australian.
So we have an Australian on the boat, but that would not be good.
Me too. Very, very funny. I was listening to the audiobook and I have a theory that 1 in every 100 people who are not Australian can successfully do the Australian accent. That's not a very high number.
No, it's really not. I cannot do an Australian accent. I have several Australian friends, and if I spend too much time around them in a long period of time, I will have an Australian accent for like 6 hours or until someone tells me.
That's such a common thing where it's like you adopt an accent. I haven't had it in America, thank goodness. But if I go to London, while I'm on the plane, I'm like, hiya, oh, cup of tea. I'm like, wow, it was quick.
Yeah, it's very quick.
Thank you so much for joining us for the official Q&A for the after show as we spoke at length about your wonderful book, Into the Drowning Deep. You can grab that at all bookshops. Also, check out all of Mira Grant's and Seanan McGuire's work. Everyone in the comments has not only been adding books to TBRs, but shouting and raving about the amazing work that you've done. In fact, someone said that after reading Into the Drowning Deep, they're already onto Seanan McGuire's stuff. So that's
thank you.
Yeah, that's a great. And I had a friend recommend you and bring you up, and then all of a sudden the book came up for the poll, and now we're chatting. So this is like a lovely chain of events, and I can't wait to get into your fantasy stuff as well. That's going to be great. Rachel, thank you for joining us with this as well.
This was so fun. You're like my hero. Everything you're saying, I just thought I was like, yes, yes.
I know. I was like, oh, well, now we have to talk. We're so busy listening to all of it. For those that want to learn more about your presence online or a quick fire way to support your stuff, how can they do that?
If you can spell my name, not Mira's, you can find me. I'm mostly on Twitter. I'm somewhat on Instagram. As a warning, because people somehow miss this, I am extremely opinionated. I swear a lot. My Twitter feed is probably half pictures of my cats, half me screaming about Magic the Gathering most of the time.
You are us combined.
You know, I will have people come in because they read a book and they liked it, and that's great. And then they are surprised that I have opinions about things. I don't understand that. Most of them are public health related right now. Public health, and also I deserve more bodily autonomy than a corpse. I yell about that a lot, it turns out. If you go there, you can find me. I do have a website. It is woefully, tragically out of date for personal reasons. I do acknowledge that, but it means that it's not as super helpful as it could be. And I am going to work on getting that back up to speed, mostly because I hired someone that will make the edits I cannot bring myself to make. When I was first setting it up, there was during the time when there was a trend for authors to have as much fun stuff on their websites as possible. And so one of the fun things I set up was a bio page for my cats. And I think everyone in their life has the one cat or dog or snake or rat or rabbit or whatever that they love as intensely as they would love a human child. That is their heart wandering around outside their body. And mine was a cat named Alice, and she passed away on February 13th, 2018. The last edits to my website were made on February 10th, 2018, because I cannot emotionally cope with the idea of taking her off the site. I hire someone. We're finally getting to the point of that, but the website's useless right now. Any bookstore will be glad to help you. Bricks and Mortar Books in Redmond, Washington is the bookstore that is most able to supply you with signed books. I go in there fairly frequently and sign stock. So if you want something signed or personalized, contact them. And Subterranean Press is currently taking orders or about to be taking orders for the next 2 Mira Grant books. They're doing This Is the Ways the World Ends, which is a collection of all the Mira Grant novellas up to this point, including Rolling in the Deep. So you could have a print copy of Rolling in the Deep that you don't have to pay $300 for. What the heck? And the cover is gorgeous. It looks like an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's straight up Midnight Society vibes. And they've also got Unbreakable coming up, which is my magical girls story. So you can, since it's a Mira Grant joint, you can be sure it's horrifying. It's dreadful. So we're going to have a nice time. Black Belt 23 says, you wrote a Magic the Gathering comic. I'm all over that. A Johnny Goldmain #1. Pre-orders are open now. Please pre-order it. I want them to let me write Tyvar.
If you pop that, if that's in a tweet, we'll retweet that. We'll get the word out.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, that is in a tweet. And then B-Rock Vandal asked what was the name of the Redmond bookstore again, and that is Brick and Mortar Books, which it looks like Fatal Flower has also supplied. They are a great little bookstore, and they can happily and cheerfully take signed book orders for you. And that is a fantastic place to go and a fantastic place to be, and I love them. And when I did my Into the Drowning Deep release party there, they actually hired a woman dressed as a mermaid.
Great.
Because that was not distressing at all to be doing my mermaid right behind me. Though it was
and you're like the large, sharp teeth.
Yeah, she's a nice mermaid lady. So it was not as distressing as the Parasite book tour, where Orbit actually sent me around to other stores at Christmas. And a remarkable number of bookstores put me in the children's section.
Oh, no.
Because I'm a woman, so I must write children's books. Just like, okay, so I'm going to say the names of Pokemon instead of swearing, and anyone who doesn't like that can kiss my Pikachu. And I'm pretty sure I ran through the entire Pokedex over the course of that tour.
We have that in common.
Mira Grant does have a Twitter. It has not been updated in like 8 years, and mostly what it says is, I don't exist! Go talk to Seanan! Seanan is real.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Congratulations on such a long-standing series, and for the fact that a book 5 years ago, we're covering it now. And my favorite fact about it is that even though you wrote it 5 years ago, it
starts just now. It starts tomorrow.
Yeah.
The Intergaddis is about to set sail, baby.
Isn't that nuts? I thought that was really, really cool. But thank you. It was really great getting to know you and learning about all of your different bodies of work as well. We'll talk soon, okay?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, Seanan.
Bye.